Hi, welcome back to another episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm here with Yousef Kassim from EasyExpunctions. Yousef, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Matthew.
We're going to talk a lot today about what innovations are taking place as far as justice and social justice, because what Yousef and his team are working on is truly changing lives, and it's going to be an exciting thing for us to talk about this part of technology that is transforming an industry that really is resistant to change. Yousef, I would love for everybody to understand your journey as a founder and how EasyExpunctions came to be. Could you give us that founder story?
Sure. Yeah, I went to college here in San Antonio, Trinity University, and ended up going to law school at St. Mary's here in San Antonio as well. And I had an idea before law school to create a company that would help individuals represent themselves to achieve an expunction. And so this was born of a personal experience. And so I'd been arrested before, learned how to do my own expunction, and thought, this would be great to deliver the same service to others.
Right. Can you tell everybody what you and I being lawyers, we know, what is an expunction?
So an expunction is a legal remedy available to individuals who've been arrested before that provides you essentially with two main rights. One is the right to deny that arrest ever occurred.
Okay.
And then two is the right to prohibit possession or distribution of that information by others. So if you're applying for a job, you get to say you've never been arrested. Wow. And then it shouldn't show up on a background check anymore.
Which, yours was in your youth, right?
Yep.
And there are many people that make bad choices in their youth. And there's many people that make bad choices every single day.
Sure.
But especially in their youth, those things can follow you for a lifetime.
Yep. 90% of major employers today run background checks. And so increased digitization of criminal history information, increased access to the internet. We're seeing this as a much more pervasive problem, especially considering that 70 million American adults have been arrested before.
70 million.
70 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had this in your youth, and as you were going through, this great education that you would get, how did you start to move towards this idea? How was EasyExpunctions born?
Yeah. So did my own expunction, thought it was a really empowering experience, one that allowed me to get some closure on an issue that had been holding me back.
Sure.
And finished law school, successfully sat for the bar exam. And at that point, I think I had thought about the idea for enough time, that I thought about how to automate it. And so filed a patent for the system, method, and process of document automation that we utilize at EasyExpunctions. Moved to Austin, began building this out with my brother, Rami.
Okay.
And was able to secure, an angel investment into EasyExpunctions and started building it out. And so I hired a, full-time developer, and him and I worked closely together to build out the first version of EasyExpunctions.
So talk a little bit about that early stage where you had personal experience. You, of course, know the market exists for sure. When you got that angel investment, did you have an MPV? Or was you really this at the ideation stage with the patent, which is an asset, which makes a lot of difference? How did you go about getting started there with that initial funding?
So I was, really fortunate that I, built a great network over time, and had a lot of wonderful people in my network, including family and friends that supported me. And one particular, family friend had told me, I know you have ideas, and and so he said, when you have an idea that you want to run with, you better bring it to me.
Okay.
So went to him with my pending patent and my idea. We had a conversation, and he said, let's do it.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So really, it was idea, business strategy, patent in hand. Got that initial investment. Sounds like it was an angel, but a little bit of friends and family on there, but enabled you to get started. Because a lot of people are stuck. They get stuck at a couple of levels, and that's a big level that people get stuck. Like, I keep a notebook with all sorts of innovative ideas, right? But it's only as good and worth what's on that piece of paper, right? But until you can get money and start to actually move forward on it, again, it's about as worthy as the paper it's on.
Yep.
But that's a great experience for people to understand. So as you hired that developer, now I haven't heard any sort of tech experience that you had. Really, you were looking at a process, patent that was there. Talk about that first, how you got the developer in and started to move on this.
Yeah, and so we had, put some feelers out, through our network to try to identify what kind of developer we'd need.
Okay.
And the first thing that we did was hire another developer that we'd known and trusted.
Okay.
That could build out, the schematics essentially, and kind of the cookbook and plan for what a developer would need to build out.
Got it.
So we, paid for that, and then at that point we knew the jobs to be done.
Sure.
And so at that point we could hire the right developer, and we're able to find somebody that could build out what we had in mind.
Okay. So on a lot of those, I mean, in dealing with clients and even some personal experience, how long do you typically budget for really scoping the work and getting that developer plan in place? How long did that take?
Yeah, I think that probably took a couple months.
Okay.
It was significant amount of work.
Sure.
To come up with something relatively detailed.
Right.
That somebody could easily follow, and something that could help me as a more functional, non-technical
Right.
person to be able to have some kind of rules in place, and that I could go hire against.
No, that makes sense.
It did take a couple months.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so you guys put this all together. What is interesting here is, again, we're at the ideation stage. You're now getting this MPV put together. What was one of the biggest challenges during that part of your journey?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was there's so much to do, and there's so many shiny objects, and it's still something that you see, as you continue to progress in your business.
Right.
And just staying focused and, trying to understand that there's this big elephant, you got to take down piece by piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so, trying to break those down into small bites as possible, and staying focused on, the things that are needed right now. And so I think that was probably the toughest part, because it was so exciting.
Sure.
And there's so many things going on. And then I think after building it out, certainly there were, challenges that we faced, that every business faces, but I think specifically our kind of business, being in the legal space.
Sure. So in talking through that, I mean, being a lawyer myself, you're a lawyer as well. Lawyers always are about, enabling change, but they don't want to change. It's one of the most interesting things that I've been a part of in this, career, is seeing and being a part of companies and help companies that are doing just amazing things. But the industry of law, of the practice of law, really hasn't changed much, in decades. So can you talk a little bit about how, for the life of EasyExpunctions and what you're doing, which could be seen as a legal profession function. Give us some idea of how that went with you as you're trying to disrupt an industry that, is not only going to not be appreciative of disruption, but have the ability to stop it, because that's what they do.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, I think, any time that you're going to disrupt a particular industry, you're obviously going to have a response from the old guard.
Right.
From folks who have an interest in, you not succeeding.
Sure.
But we as attorneys know that, our, duty is to justice.
Right.
And to promoting justice. And, for us to reach even a relative semblance of justice, it's going to require all hands on deck.
Right.
And we recognize today that, even with all the attorneys that we have, and all the legal aid clinics, and all the nonprofit organizations, and innovative companies that are joining the justice tech space to provide consumers with alternative options, that there's still a big need.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still a lot of folks today who are priced out. A lot of folks today who really could benefit from legal remedies, legal services, wonderful, laws that we have in place today, but maybe can't afford an attorney. And so, I think it's ironic, when an attorney or any type of, person in this space, whether it's judges, prosecutors' offices, clerks, is, antagonistic towards, innovative solutions, because we need those.
Right.
We need everybody working together to promote what it is that we're supposed to be doing, which is justice. And so,
well, let me ask you this. A lot of what you just brought about legal aid, there's a lot, it's really a nonprofit approach to, these type of justice issues. Pro bono is essentially, nonprofit, where lawyers are giving their time and talent to it, for free. That doesn't necessarily move the needle. Yep. It impacts, it has a positive impact. But I had this conversation about this and other, social, impacts that need to be done that are done by nonprofits is they only last as long as the funding dollars, which grant writing or whatever it is, takes place. How are you looking with EasyExpunctions, which is a for-profit innovative solution, to try to change that? Have you thought about those type of things, about how you're in a model that is largely nonprofit, you're for-profit, but again, you've got some advantages that the nonprofits don't. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, like I had mentioned earlier, I think it's all hands on deck.
Sure.
I think legal aid clinics play a critical role in our community. I think technology could help augment their efforts.
Absolutely.
So I think that leveraging technology, leveraging individuals, cooperation with our courts, empowering pro se litigants, as well, I think together could allow these nonprofit organizations to have more impact. Because, like you'd mentioned, there are funding, dollars available. There are organizations that are looking for these type outcomes. We feel that technology could provide the ability for us to stretch those dollars further. And
absolutely.
So to still focus on the impact. I think as a for-profit organization in this space, certainly there's a lot of responsibility, especially being in the justice tech space.
Sure. That
maybe another business, might not consider. For us, for example, we make sure all of our products have complete consumer protections, 100% money-back guarantee, every dollar out of your pocket, including filing fees to the court. Because at the end of the day, unauthorized practice of law and these type laws are out there to protect consumers, not attorneys.
Sure.
We need to make sure that consumers are informed, and we need to make sure that consumers are protected. And so we take the lead on that by providing really an unprecedented level of consumer protections for folks who are in this space. We think that that's the responsibility of somebody who wants to have a for-profit organization in this space. We're outcomes focused. So we say, hey, look, we're either going to help you achieve this or we'll give you all of your money back. And so for us, we feel like there are certain areas in the law that are relatively clear.
Sure.
You either qualify or you don't. And so an injustice would have to occur for you not to achieve that outcome. And so we ensure that for our customers.
No, that's great. I mean, the nonprofit approach to these type of social issues that are out there, whether it's in the justice or any other social issues that are out there, they're usually program focused. And again, tied to budgetary dollars that limit the ability for really what I would say the ability for innovative impact to the issue, whatever it is, food, justice, whatever it is. But the technology aspect that you're doing, right, gives it the scalability and the sustainability that unfortunately nonprofits can't get because, again, they're tied to dollars, and when those grant dollars drive up, they're usually not built sustainable. They're doing great and amazing things, but there's not usually a sustainable model. Unlike, using technology, you can create a sustainable model for the same issue.
And we work with nonprofits today, and so we think there's an opportunity to leverage, the strengths that we both have to be able to deliver outcomes for people. So, for example, in Houston, Goodwill Houston, is a leader. Goodwill's across the country.
Yeah.
We have a program that we've been working with them for over 3 years now that pays for this for folks who are going through their programs. And so they're helping folks get jobs.
Right.
And they're a workforce powerhouse. And so for us, we're able to integrate into their intake process to be able to understand essentially what a before and after would look like.
Right.
A lot of their folks do have records, and so being able to help them, leveraging the technology that we have on our end, leveraging their ability to have certain programs in place that have shared values, have shared interests, and so certainly think there's opportunity for us to do the same with legal aid clinics, other nonprofit organizations that share our values, share our mission, and we can work together to achieve those outcomes.
No, I mean, you're definitely, I mean, technology is an enabler, and you guys, of what y'all are doing, are enabling. I mean, Goodwill, I can imagine they have a lot of people they're trying to, work on their workforce development programs, back to work programs that hit a brick wall
Sure.
when they go to get that job after that training and realize, nope, the employers won't talk to them because of something that happened 20 years ago. And they're judged as that today. So, no, I mean, again, what you guys are doing is amazing. Talk a little bit about the mission focus at EasyExpunctions, because you're clearly delineating, what you guys, your values are, your mission, shared purpose. But let's talk about your workforce. How do you guys really coalesce around what that mission is for EasyExpunctions?
Sure. So it's justice through data. And so at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're developing innovative products that help achieve justice for individuals, for attorneys, for nonprofit organizations. Today we have a successful consumer-facing product. We also have other products that we've developed that are working with some of these other organizations that touch this space, rely on the same type of information.
Sure.
Allow us to leverage technology to be able to deliver outcomes for folks. And so, really we have a diverse team of professionals, software engineers, attorneys, marketing and sales professionals. The commonality that we all share is a desire to help people overcome obstacles. We believe in second chances.
Right.
And so it's something that we live by as an organization. We have creative folks that work with us. We encourage people to be leaders, to step up, to emulate the values that are important to us.
That's great. Let's talk about the word justice, because you and I, again, as attorneys, it's something that we went to school, learning around laws and justice. It's interesting in the practical aspects of law, and I have this conversation with people from time to time of the law can be on your side, but that doesn't mean that justice is actually served. Mm-hmm. And so many times we see in the cases, because we're humans, and at the end of the day, somebody is a decision maker on, one way or another, or they sometimes make up their own, third part of it. But because of the human element of the fact of our society and the legal system, it doesn't necessarily produce justice.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about that term justice and how you guys view justice and what y'all are doing?
Yeah, and I keep coming back to that all hands on deck.
Right.
Because there's such a big justice gap today. There's this gap that very difficult for us to overcome immediately, very difficult for us to overcome absolutely. And so we look at it as a quest towards at least relative justice, and so doing what we can here and across the country to be able to deliver justice for our customers and people who are going, today through the criminal justice system, but in the future, looking at other areas of law where we can help individuals achieve justice. And so I think it's not an overnight thing,
right?
And certainly we can't do it alone. And we found that the best way for us to achieve for our customers is through cooperation. And so if we have, folks that share our values in the court system who can understand that, look, the pro se litigants, but I'll explain to folks, is somebody who is not an attorney,
right,
and chooses to represent themselves and go to court and try to achieve something. And so the pro se litigant is the most vulnerable person in that courtroom.
Right.
They don't have a legal education. They're also not in there every day.
Right.
If they're at the courthouse, it might be one of a handful of times in their lifetime that they step into that courtroom, so it's an uncomfortable place. And so, recognizing their vulnerability, recognizing that, this is a place where they're uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I think it's our job as attorneys, as courts, as clerks' offices to protect those folks. And I know that our understanding of some of these laws today and unauthorized practice of law makes it difficult to for folks who are even well-intentioned to understand where can I intervene and how can I intervene. But I think focusing on the outcomes, focusing on the vulnerability of the pro se litigant and at least trying to eliminate our bias.
Right.
We see a lot of bias against pro se litigants today. Folks that believe that, hey, maybe historically pro se litigants haven't had all the tools they need to be successful, and so maybe they've relied on asking questions at the courthouse. Our pro se litigants are different. They're going to have all the tools that they need to be successful. We're going to generate all the relevant legal documents. We're going to file them for you electronically. If you have any questions or hit any roadblocks, you have somebody to call that can triage that for you, as opposed to having to rely on yourself. And so we think that courts should at least remove their bias against the pro se litigant and understand that there are innovative organizations out there today that are going to provide the tools needed for pro se litigants to be successful, just as successful as an attorney.
Sure.
In certain matters.
Sure. And I think the key word there is in certain matters too,
yes.
Right? Because you're exactly right. And what you're talking about.
We always need lawyers.
We do.
We will always,
well, I don't
really
know
do.
about that.
No, we really do. We really do. And
we do.
We don't look at it as competitive to attorneys. We're going to need all the help that we can get.
Well, but our world is governed by laws, right? Yep. And they're like this for an expunction. It is a legal process.
Sure.
There's not enough attorneys with competency to be able to address this issue, even though it has major impact.
Sure.
In addition to that, there's this, inability for those that have the issue to be connected with those type of attorneys. Just finding an attorney, unless you get into a car accident today and you will literally look up and probably see the billboard of who you could call, there's not somebody out there there's not an easy access to an attorney that can help you with this. So for what you're doing, and there are other issues here, that people deal with that could use that help. I think property taxes and some of that administrative stuff, which we see some other startups coming around on this. And I want to be clear too, from a criminal versus a civil, there's different rights that a pro se litigant has.
Sure.
And what you're talking a lot about, but not all about, is in the civil side. There are some criminal side that there is some issues there potentially for pro se litigants, not in the main issue, but in ancillary type proceedings they're dealing with.
That's an interesting, sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
Delineation that you just made, because as attorneys, we recognize that that's kind of the dividing line. You're either in the civil space for the most part or the criminal space for the most part. But even the rights that are afforded for individuals who are proceeding, through the criminal side versus the civil side is different. At least today we have an understanding that you have a right to an attorney.
Correct.
On the criminal side. And so somebody who is faced with criminal charges has a right, to an attorney. That same right doesn't extend to the civil side.
It doesn't.
And so there are, relatively simple but important, remedies on the civil side that could really impact people's lives that I think certainly touch on, the topic of justice.
Sure.
That nobody has a right to today. Somebody who's going through a divorce, somebody who's going through a name change.
Sure.
Somebody who's going through what would otherwise be a relatively simple legal matter impacts their life significantly. Absolutely. And so just having that intervention, and we are seeing, some states across the country start to recognize and extend more of that right to the civil side to know that, hey, look, if we really want to look at justice, it extends to that civil side as well.
Well, and it's interesting. I went to law school in Alabama. The court-appointed attorney process is every attorney in that state will be court-appointed, regardless of what you do, for a criminal matter.
Wow.
Now, it's on the criminal side. They don't actually have, and the word is escaping me right now, of public defenders.
Okay.
There's not an actual public defender's office that's funded by the state. As part of being a lawyer, you are just like, at any point in time can be called up to be a public defender.
Wow.
There's pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
There's greater supply. I wouldn't say there's greater, qualified supply.
Right.
As a transactional lawyer myself, having to go into a criminal courtroom, wow, that would be just as terrifying for the pro se litigant on it. But so there's been a lot of ways that people try to address it. Here in Texas, there's not enough public defenders to meet the supply of this. And so, again, and that's kind of the debate that goes on, just even on, the criminal side is, should we be opening that up to other non-lawyers when that is a fundamental right to have a different path, so that way there's a greater, more qualified supply? Because in Alabama, if they call the corporate attorney, it's not a qualified supply. But here, if you can't get a public defender, or get a public defender that spreads so thin, it might be almost the exact type of qualified supply they're getting, even though somebody's in that criminal setting. And so it happens a lot. And again, there's a lot of socioeconomic, just based upon the populations that are more in the criminal system versus, not. I mean, again, there's just a whole lot there. So I'm excited to hear you say that you look beyond just expunctions into other ways that you guys are trying to impact the whole pro se litigants, wherever they are. Because it's a big deal. Can you talk a little bit about the relative justice? You said that word once. But let's go back to that. What do you mean by relative justice? Isn't it justice or injustice? What's relative justice?
Yeah, relative justice, I think, is what could be an achievable result for us today.
Okay.
Absolute justice, I think, is difficult. Maybe something that we can look at in theory. And try to craft laws that justice in mind. But I think today we understand that there are inequities, and that there's systems in place that make it difficult to deliver on some of those laws. In Texas, for example, only a fraction, maybe 1 to 5% of folks that are eligible for expunction actually end up achieving that outcome. And so we recognize that, even if the law is crafted really well, which I wouldn't argue that it is necessarily, and I would argue that there are some other states that have it better, allow for more individuals to have this type of relief available. But even then, folks that could get this really valuable relief aren't receiving it. And so either they're priced out, either they're not aware of this type of solution. And so we're trying to craft a remedy that helps us get closer to more and more people achieving what the law had envisioned at that time, which is to allow individuals who meet this specific criteria to achieve that type outcome. And so we think that technology can help address that. We don't think it's going to be perfect, but we think that relative justice is something that's achievable for us today.
Now, you guys, as you talked about earlier, shared mission, shared purpose, collaborations. Talk a little bit about, some trade groups and some industry, how people are coming together around social injustice innovations. Can you talk a little bit about y'all's participation and maybe even the future for that?
Sure. And so recently founded an organization along with some other really wonderful founders, Sonia, Camilla, and Aaron, other legal tech founders in the justice tech space that have some companies, Courtroom 5, People Court, Hello Divorce, civil type matters that we're using technology to address. And we've gone through similar accelerator programs. We went through the Duke Law Tech Accelerator program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, really wonderful program that we would totally recommend, and allowed us to network with other folks that going through the same thing. Facing the same type issues, facing the same type resistance at times from organizations that we feel would be ideal partners. But ironically, we're getting that type of resistance, and so banded together, and we've been really floored by the amount of support we're getting from across the country, from companies, organizations, professors, investors. Got a wonderful executive director, Maya Markovich, who's heading this Justice Technology Association today. And a wonderful group of advisors. And the mission of the organization is to support like-minded companies that are coming up with innovative solutions that may include attorneys, but not necessarily. And some of the founders of these organizations are attorneys. Some aren't. Some are software developers or engineers that feel like they can have an impact on this space. And so we're really excited. We've gotten well over 100 applications already from companies across the country that want to join the JTA. Yeah, and so the hope is that this can become an organization that will promote similar type businesses, will communicate a set of values, especially around consumer protection, especially around promoting justice, supporting and promoting pro se litigants. And so, really excited about it. It's still very new, but
that's great. Congratulations, though.
Yeah,
that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're excited.
What about, we've talked about nonprofits. You had some exciting news about in the future about, a fund, something to try to, again, leverage this for-profit, nonprofit collaboration.
Sure.
Tell us some of that news here.
Yeah, and so after the success of our program with Goodwill Houston, we'd like to leverage that program and go ahead and do the same thing with other organizations across the country.
Okay.
So we're putting together a philanthropic fund today to pay for expunctions for individuals who otherwise cannot afford it.
That's great.
Even our service, which
right.
Comes at a fraction of the cost of hiring an attorney.
Right.
But at the same time, there are folks out there who still can't afford that, and so we want to make sure that they're not priced out. And so we'll have this fund. We'll work with nonprofit organizations that share our mission and would like to extend scholarships out to the populations that they work with.
What do you see the timeline, or I guess, this maybe you don't, but technology, is it Ohm's law, right, with technology, right, in order to actually accelerate? From a justice tech, we're still very much in infancy. People have talked about medical records. Medical records has been on a decades-long journey to get digitization, to be able to provide access to just your medical records. You take that into the social, to the justice system, whether it's civil or criminal, it's not even there yet. Texas, just for people to know, literally is just in the middle of getting all court records for a certain time period online, and it is 2022, and it's not completely there yet. So there's still some pre-work that has to be done in order for, again, transparency, justice through data, to have all that data there. What do you see as the timeline into the future for justice technology being able to start bending the curve? Because it will bend the curve. When do you see it?
Next 5 years.
Next 5 years.
Yes.
So it will accelerate that fast.
I do think so. I think, you're seeing a lot more entrance into the space. I think you're seeing a lot more cooperation happening. I think you're seeing more and more people correctly recognize that there is a justice gap. It needs to be resolved. We need all hands on deck. And so I think some of these innovative organizations are coming in at an increased pace. We found that investors are extremely interested in this space, correctly recognize that this is an area that hasn't been serviced in the past, and today look at it as a huge opportunity. And so I think you're correct to hit on the data part. Today, to give you an example, Texas, 254 counties. Each county is kind of like its own kingdom, and they have their own way of, keeping their information, communicating information. So it becomes a challenge to, one, collect all that information, and then two, make sense out of it. And so, especially when everybody's kind of speaking differently, and so,
sure.
Going through that data normalization process is a huge lift. But it provides the foundation for some of the work that we're trying to do. And so I do think it's, slower than we'd like.
Sure.
But I do think that 5 years from now, we're going to be really surprised with the advancements that we're seeing, the reception that some of these organizations are going to be having, and the impact we're going to be seeing. I think, the time is ripe. There's a lot of things that need to be done, and I think certainly a lot of people stand to benefit, whether it's these organizations, these, new innovative organizations, or even the state, even attorneys, even legal aid clinics. I think there's an opportunity for each one of these organizations to benefit from leveraging technology.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on to talk about this. This is super exciting. And again, within 5 years, I mean, we'll get to look back and say, hey, we had Yousef on the program 5 years from now, and you guys are again just bending that curve, which will be exciting on a variety of levels. So thank you for coming and sharing it with us here today. For those of you that are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the variety of platforms we have, check the description. You can find out about Yousef, his team at EasyExpunctions. We'll have all those links in there. Leave us a comment, subscribe to us, let us know we're adding value if you have any questions. Same thing if you're watching us on YouTube. Click a like button, subscribe to us, let us know some comments, some feedback there. We always like to hear from our listeners, and until next time, we'll see you then. Thanks so much.